I'll let Chase talk about that.
So I do think it brings up a good transition though, as we think about assessment data, and how we look at those sort of things. Give you all a copy of this. So I think one of the things that typically happens in October is we review assessment data, and as we review assessment data, it becomes about that assessment. And I think our conversations, to your point, is that we have to honor the system that exists, right? That we know that students that are looking at, when we look at graduation, we look at transition readiness, we look at ACT, we look at assessments that tell us where our kids are. Those are important indicators for us. We have to ensure that what we're doing is aligned to that. But I think that whole idea of this community-centered vision is that we're naive if we think that we're the only ones that contribute to education. And I think, to your point, for a long time in schools, it's been the job of educators, the job of teachers, to say this is what learning looks like and this is how kids learn. And I think our assumptions are that it takes much more than that. It takes business and industry. It takes our community. It takes our families. It takes a collective vision around what we want to build. So I think this quote on the front summarizes that tremendously. We need to transform our cities and communities into regional learning ecosystems in which everyone in the community sees themselves as an educator and learner. And I think that's the idea of what we want to move towards. So I'm excited to share a lot of this with you all tonight. If you go to flip over to the first page, these were some of the same assumptions that you saw last year when we talked about state assessment. But I think as we think about data, we know that state assessment is a piece of data. We're going to talk about that piece of data, but we also know that for our own selves, we're looking at data and the experiences that students have and how many students have those experiences in our schools, and so we want to talk about that as well. We know that state assessment data is really an opportunity for schools to gather together and say, how are we doing? What does this say about us? What does this not say about us? Because as much as state assessment data says, it also says a lot of things that the school is or isn't, so that's important. We know that culture will continue to be a focus, that it's foundational to everything that we do, inspiring Nelson County pride in our students, our community, our staff, our learners, everyone. That's an important conversation. And then we know that, and this is why I think this book is important, is that the data that we want to produce and the experiences that we want to have for kids go far beyond assessment data. It goes far beyond an assessment tool. And so that's really the goal of this. I think this quote actually comes from chapter 8 on the bottom of this next page, that it's not about pilots or bolt-on programs, but whether it's a rethinking of the learning process. And that's really where we are, is rethinking what does it say, what does it mean for us, especially as we think about the values that we've established as a school district.
Now, I can tell you, if we did pilots or bolt-on programs, we could raise test scores by 5%, 7%, 8%. But that's not what we're after. We're really after a whole system change and growth that allows us to see sustainable change and growth over time. And I will also say, like, in the high schools as an example, every high school in the state went down about 20% in reading and math and science because they changed the test from what was a content test to an ACT test. And that happened. You also see statewide, for example, the ACT average has gone down over a point across the state. And I think that's largely because people have shifted their values a little bit away from that when the state changed the assessment system in the last 4 or 5 years. And they changed it because they also realized, as you see with Western Kentucky, colleges are not paying attention to the ACT like they were. And many of our kids are realizing they don't have to go to college like they did 10 years ago. So I say that to say there's a trend in the ACT. I don't expect it to continue to go down across the state. I think it's probably going to plateau again based on, because it's probably right now the ACT score is where it was 20 years ago. I'd say that's a symptom though of people saying, okay, we played the ACT game, or we played this state accountability game from 2014 to 2006, 17, 18, and then you flopped everything, so people kind of moved away from it. Anyways, I bring that up to say there's a lot of unique things that impact this data.
So you still got, but that being said, you still have colleges that value this ACT because you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, any chief, or whatever. they, yeah, they valued as ACT.
So if you go to the community backpack data, you know, this is the first part of this conversation. And I think when Mr. Bradley became superintendent and established some really big goals for us as a district, these were the goals, right? So we wanted every student to have a caretaking experience as part of their school day. So through Robin's work and the work of her team, this year, OKH, Thomas Nelson, Boston, Foster Heights has that experience every day. Cox's Creek has that experience during the week. Bloomfield, I believe, is beginning, Bloomfield Middle School. So you can see that the number of kids that are having a caretaking experience through Caring Connect or Boston's at Families, whatever the school might call that, there's an opportunity for kids to have a group of peers and a teacher that are really pouring into them and thinking about what it means to care for themselves and one another. As a parent of a first grader at Foster Heights, it is a tremendous experience to see him get excited about Caring Connect every day. He talks about that more than he probably talks about a lot of other things that go on, and he loves it. He gets to be in Caring Connect with fifth graders. He's in Miss Smith's Caring Connect, and for him, that's a highlight of his day. And so that's obviously
We see that across all of our elementary schools. Really, the elementary response to that has been so just very powerful. I think too, if you look at this data, 15% to 40%, that's every day. I mean, we're not counting schools that just do it one day a week. That also, 35% is approximately somewhere around 1,200 kids. So 1,200 to 1,400 kids, I pointed, that's a significant. It looks like, oh, that's 1,200 to 1,400 kids increase in that experience.
student leadership. One of the things that we began this year was the community centered course. So we said backpack leaders, one of their job would be to have a class every day. So every school has a group of students, and those kids are doing some really tremendous things. I got to talk to the students at Boston the other day about that class, and there's just some really strong kids in that group. Kids at Thomas Nelson were putting together NTI for the school, which is going to be a really powerful conversation. Got to go in Bloomfield Middle School and see some of the work that Mr. Patterson was doing up there. But we know that's a growth area, and that's why our student leadership directors, one of their priorities is how do we create opportunities for students to lead during the school day. And we're trying to really think creatively around that, and I expect that number to go up quite a bit over the next few years.
It's still about 450 kids increase, which is, that means a class that they have during their school day. That's a fact. It really is.
Classroom and digital learning, that's an investment that you guys started to make 2 years ago around one-to-one technology. We're almost there in grades 3 through 12 with the devices. We know the device is not the end-all be-all, but what it does do, and what we've said repeatedly, is it takes the walls of a classroom and it greatly expands it. And it allows kids to see a much larger world as we think about the learning that could take place and can take place. We're really excited about that opportunity, and I believe after the third year of that, the way it was originally set up, will be 100% one-to-one in those grades. 50% on students reading on grade level by second grade. That will be the class that are kindergartners this year. That is a focus for our K2 literacy specialists, and you can look at our data, our assessment data, and see that we've been around 50%. But our goal is that that grows up. You know that reading is the thing. If we get kids reading on grade level by the end of second grade, the chances of them being able to have even better experiences in all these other things go way up. Work-based learning has obviously been a growth area with Laura and her team, 21% to 49%. And I would say too, based on some of our conversations at the school level, it's higher than that.
So, just to summarize that data, we've had, so we think a 30% increase in work-based learning experiences. That means they're, during the school day, working, going, co-oping. So that is approximately 130 kids that are doing that now that weren't previously doing that last year. That's almost that's like a whole grade level. So Laura, how many kids do we have at both of our high schools right now that are doing work-based learning?
It's around, I think it's around like 190. Because yesterday when we were visiting with the group, it went up a few students. So it's like a moving number.
And while we won't review this at a board meeting, if you guys are able to go through the spreadsheet that shows where these kids are working and see these kids' stories and understand it like that work, some of the stories you're seeing come out of that with kids doing things that they would never have the opportunity to do is really powerful. So whether it's, we got 2 kids that are welding in NPR and a kid working in engineering, we met with a guy today at Orbis who they currently had 0 kids there. But just in that conversation today, and they were taking it to a whole different place. Like they were just thinking of it. They're changing HR policies to be able to allow our students to come into the conversations.
Had a conversation today, Andrew was talking about a student in Essex County High School who's doing an engineering internship, and they're like giving them projects, engineering projects to begin with. So that kid is not just there, you know, making sure things are stable. He's doing projects, engineering projects. So
Orbis is a national company, a multinational company, and they were meeting with the vice president of HR to change policy at the corporate level to impact our students. Right. Because of the work Amber and the team have done with them.
And then the last experience that we've talked about is this idea that every kid would have an opportunity to showcase their gifts. And there's not a number there, because if we gave you one, it'd be bad data. But I think one of our conversations has been that gift showcase opportunities are really embedded in lots of these other things. We think about student leadership, think about work-based learning, you know, some of our conversations we've had over the past few weeks, that gift showcase opportunities for kids to say, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm learning from that experience, is going to continue, I think, to increase across our schools. And our schools are even having very powerful conversations about what it looks like to take elementary kids and let them see high school kids and vice versa as they share their gifts and showcase what they're doing. So we're excited about some of those opportunities as well. So as we move into the assessment portion of this, I did think it was important to give you all some context on the assessments themselves and some of the things where we were a couple years ago, what the tests look like now, and where we're moving towards. So in elementary schools, not a lot changes. The KPREP test has been the KPREP test for a few years. That assessment is pretty standard. The things that are changing, though, is that they have created new standards for reading, math, and social studies. And in the spring of 2020, our students, in addition to taking KPREP, will be taking field tests on new standards. Those won't count towards accountability, but there'll be a test that our kids take. And then in the following year, 2021, they will be assessed on those new standards. So that will be something that will be different for elementary, middle. High school will look a lot different next year when we have this conversation. So last year and this year, the reading and math scores were based on the ACT. Next year, there will be this year there should be a new assessment in 10th grade around reading and math, and that's what will be used to count accountability. The science test will be the same. Social studies will have a field test this year. There's new social studies standards at the high school, so they will have a field test. And then transition readiness continues to be tweaked a little bit. There's some components that they continue to massage out around what counts as work-based experiences, how kids get opportunities to show college readiness, so on and so forth. But transition readiness is still a large conversation. So you can see on the next page what our data, going back multiple years is tricky to do that because the assessments have changed. They look different. Even the standards have somewhat tweaked. So we did give you some comparables from one year to the next. And this is really the percentage of students that were proficient or distinguished. So you can see that there are some areas in there that we're really proud of. There's obviously some growth areas for us, and that's something that we continue to look at and evaluate. You can also see, that's true for elementary, middle, and high. You know, Celebrate Elementary reading and writing, those are areas that are important and focused for us, but we know that we have some work to do in some other areas. Same thing in middle school, same thing in high school. And if you look at the ACT data, you can get an understanding of where we were versus the state, and in most of our areas we were close to what the state average would be. Transition readiness was 65.7%. That once again is also a different number from you looking at previously. So up until last year, we got bonus points, right? So if a kid was both college and career ready, you got bonus points. So you might see a school district say that they got 100% college and career readiness, but it wasn't 100% of kids. It was 100% of points because they got bonus points for kids. The bonus point conversation no longer really exists around transition readiness. So this is the percentage of students, and we fully expect that to be an area where we see some growth as we get more kids working. Work-based experiences is an opportunity for kids to demonstrate transition readiness. We also, Laura may know this thought Fred, we've had a dramatic increase in dual credit, or we've had a large increase in dual credit.
Yeah.
We didn't share that data tonight
Yeah.
because we're like a few days away from confirming it. We didn't want to give you bad data, but we are going to talk about that in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and last year we had 410 students receive dual credit, so that kind of gives you an idea of, we have a lot of students getting access to that.
So that's another way to demonstrate transition readiness. And then the graduation indicator, you can see there is the indicator that averages some data. You can see over the 5-year mark, which is what we traditionally looked at, that it was 95.3%. So any
I
questions?
expect that I think it's, we should see that increase as well. Largely due to the work going on right next door.
Across the channel.
Along with the high schools, the work they're dealing with, some, I think, creative supports for students that may fall behind. And I would even say the work that some of the mentorship work that's going on. That number, that graduation indicator number, we should see it go up over the next 3 years every year.
Any questions on this data?
I can't say that I'm real excited about it.
Yeah, I'd say we're not excited about pieces
I'm
and
not
parts of
excited
it.
about parts of it at all.
I'd say too, we recognize as we look at the data, we had this conversation last year, as a team, that, I didn't expect to see drastic increases in these numbers. And I think that the approach we're taking is a much more long-term process. It is about investing in people, investing in building capacity, investing in the flywheel that we continue to talk about, which is vision, values, purpose. Knowing that our discipline, our precise pedagogy that I talked about is really where we are. That is where we are, and I'd say we're going to experience a lot of growth in that precise pedagogy and some of these conversations, but I can tell you that doesn't mean test scores are going to drastically increase in the next year. What I'd say what is going to increase is the work that we're doing around student leadership, student caretaking, work-based learning, dual credit opportunities for students. Will the test scores go up? They probably will. But you should see it more go like this than like this. And there's a few pieces on here that are still a mystery to us, to be honest with you, because the tests are so new. We're trying to figure them out ourselves.
I don't expect them to go from here to here. I expect them to go at a nice pace. But this is not even going up. I don't know. I'm concerned with that. I am very concerned.
I would also say this. If you were to ask our principals how much we talk about test scores, they're going to say not very much.
I'm sure they won't.
They're going to say we don't really talk about it.
Well, they need to start talking about it and get more serious about that.
I
That's the
think
problem.
the issue though is what we're really pursuing is a much larger paradigm shift around the purpose of school. And as we've talked about over the past year, as we think about the traditional assumptions about schools, and Jeff, you talk about what are we saying it's not working. I think we can assume this is part of the reason it's not working, right? This is telling us the model of the system of working is deficiency based and working from a baseline where at least 50% of the kids on average. So if you look at Nelson County schools, we fall about right in the middle. And we've fallen about right in the middle for the last few years. You're compared to the norm. And that's why on the back it says 3-star. We're right in the middle group. The reality is the middle groups of our schools is reinforcing about a 50% success rate for kids. And we know that's going to take a system-wide change for that. That's why we invested heavily in early literacy. So we invested heavily in leadership development, not only for principals, but backpack leaders. That's why we're investing heavily in social and emotional needs. So I'm just reminding you of that because you've been part of that conversation. And I think we are excited for the future. We really are. We've got a ton of great things going on. Our teachers, we've got 60 teachers doing teacher externships. That would be number one in the state. We've got, I'd say, probably more kids in work-based learning by percentage than anyone in the state.
We don't lose any money or anything because of these scores, do we?
No,
mean-
I think and Wes said this earlier, and I think it's for consideration. it's a data point. And it's a data point that we look at, and it's a data point that we have to make sense of, and it's a data point that gives us some language to talk about things. But it's not the only data point. And I would say that the reason that we don't stress the conversation with principals daily or much is because to chase a changing accountability model, and this has changed, you know this because you sit on the state boards over and over. This accountability model has changed. It will continue to change. If I were to get into with you about how accountability scores, which you'll see on the back, is calculated and done, it's down to 3 or 4 decimal points this year. It's going to continue to change next year. We're introducing new things into the system again next year that will be part of accountability. So it's a lot of moving parts. So does the assessments tell us things? Yeah, absolutely it does. Are there growth areas? Absolutely there are. But I think that's why the conversation around a larger data point or larger data points is really important, because we have a lot of really great things going on that the KPREP data is not going to say, yeah, that's what it is. So if you look on the back, this year the new piece that you probably heard a lot about as a board member and community member is the STAR system. So in the past, schools got a number, and it was you were either a distinguished school, a proficient school, or a needs improvement school. That was kind of the 3 categories. So now they've gone to a star rating system where it's 1 to 5 stars. There's a lot of moving parts in it. If you look, the pieces that make up a star rating and then the weighted percentage of those stars is kind of unique, and it's going to continue to shift. The one thing I do think, though, is that, or one thing that's kind of easy to grasp onto is that if you had a group that has significant, if you had a gap group that was significant, gap groups meaning students that traditionally had gaps in instruction, students with special needs, minorities, low-income students, those are considered gap group students. Then if you had a significant group, you were bumped down a star. So they did all the calculations, but if you had one of those groups, you were bumped down, and that's obviously something for us to look at and consider. But the good news on all this, last year, if you remember, we had TSI schools, which was targeted school improvement. We had, I believe, 6 schools that had TSI status. They all exited TSI status, which meant that their gap group improved enough to exit TSI status. And then you can see here the different star ratings for the different schools. They do rate Boston and New Haven down into 2 scores because the state classifies elementary as one and middle as the other. So you can see that as well. And you can also see at the top, they don't give us an overall district rating, but they do give us an overall elementary school rating, an overall middle school rating, and an overall high school rating. So you can see what those are.
So does this 1-star rating for New Haven, does that put them in kind of a specific status? They're on alert or something like that?
So there's a difference. This is where it gets tricky. So I'll do my best to try to explain it. So there is a difference in state accountability and federal classifications from ESSA. So the state accountability model is based on this, and this has nothing to do with like labels or money or like targeted support, that type of stuff. The federal labels, CSI and TSI, are kind of a different distinction. So CSI is the bottom 5% of Title I schools. TSI is that there's significant gap groups in that percentage. So New Haven, even though the middle school was 1, it did not receive a CSI or a TSI label, which meant they weren't in the bottom 5%.
So, you know, I said a few things for Casey from the newspaper. I was pretty clear on my stance as where we are as a district. And we, as you guys know, when you visit our schools and we work with our principals, we've had significant change in the past, however many years, however far you want to go back. We've also had significant growth over the past 6 to 12 months in terms of culture, building leadership capacity. I think what we're seeing in our schools continues to get better and better, and that comes from the people in our schools. And for us to even think about this when we work with them it's just we don't, right? Like, we see the whole story. We recognize that the way this is broken down only tells a very small part of the reality. And I think we see practices going on in schools that are 2-stars, that are highly effective practices, that may not be going on in a school that's higher than that. It's really about time and place and part of that history. We also have some schools that probably have taken a little more of a test-centric approach than others, to be frank. And that's part of this conversation as well. And I think we are excited about what's going on. And this conversation right here, we feel like, just like Mr. Goff said, I think Carla would say the same thing. When you start this conversation and you're changing the way kids view school and their perception and identity, it starts to really change the way they interact. And we're in year really 1 of this. Even though the conversation shifted significantly, we're still in year 1 of this work. And I'd say we've had, from my perception, I feel like I'm pretty hard on us and myself. We've had more progress and growth than I would expect. We've had some. So,
But doesn't this tell us if they're learning?
so I would argue no. And here's why I would say that. So as a principal of a school, if you look at the journey when I was at Thomas Nelson, the scores went like this every year. And I can tell you that as they went up until 2016, we weren't necessarily becoming a better school. We were becoming a more test-centric school. And that's the challenge that I see in all these models. Is I would argue that the work that's going on today in our high schools, it's not as test-centric, it's changing the lives of our kids much more deeply because of it. So I would argue that these kids that are getting experiences in the workforce when they're juniors and seniors are going to be far better off than sitting in front of a ACT test prep process or a classroom that's probably going to have almost zero, like hypothetically, math class is going to have zero relevance to them when they leave and graduate. So that's where it's like, what's the purpose of school? We come back to that conversation, and I think it's really a paradigm shift around that. So I understand where you're coming from, and I would say just based on my experiences, I found that as we got better at that game of the test, we actually got worse as a school in a sense, and it was setting us back. So I share that as just my own
I don't know about,
experience.
I know you're telling us this, Wes, but this is the way I look at it. Each student is an individual. You cannot conform, there's no plan. That one student has a plan, the next student has a plan, the next student has a plan. We all understand that, okay? But you have to make it all work. The student over here still has to pass a test, still has to be tested. And this doesn't prove to me that, the Care and Connect deal, I have no problem with that either, because a student, if they're more involved, then they want to get better, they want to learn and all that. But evidently, somewhere along this, I'm not happy. I mean, I've told you this.
Well, let me put this out there.
I'm not happy.
Am I the only one that remembers that we were told as a board, when we allocated money to the community center, we allocated the money to the Chromebooks. When we started this, we were told that test scores were not going to be the focus and that they would probably go down. This is exactly what I expected to see.
Well, you might have expected to see.
Well, we
but
all
I
got
didn't
the same
go along with
message.
it to begin with.
So,
The kids are valued, whether we like it or not, they're valued on test scores.
so I would argue a couple things.
Even the
One,
ACT
I think
thing.
this is
Well, are
important to
all
put
the
in
kids
context.
getting the ACT? Here's my
They
point on
have
this.
to, because the state
Right,
pays
the
for
state
it,
makes it pay.
everybody.
But they're all not
will
going
take
to college. What we're
That's
saying is
right.
there's all these other routes. So what do I give a shit if a kid gets a 12 when they take the ACT, if they're never going to take it and go to UK, if they're going to get out and they're going to be making $35 an hour welding, I really don't care what that kid gets on the
Oh,
ACT.
I do. Well, I do, because an ACT score, it doesn't make it, to me, it shows.
Make you a better person?
No, it shows to me that they've learned things in a classroom.
So,
That they've been taught and they've learned things in a
So
classroom.
the kid that gets 28's learn more than the kid that's got a 12.
No, they applied it more, that doesn't mean they've learned more.
Right. Right, so what does the test score mean?
so a couple of things that's important, I think, to remember when you think about test scores. One, so when you look down here on this page about the assessments, so let's take Boston, for example. So in Boston, for their elementary science scores, that was based on about 35 kids. Okay, so science scores for an elementary school were based just on a kid that's in fourth grade. So for us to make broad interpretations about the level of science instruction at New Haven School, based on a small sample size of kids, that's a tricky slope.
That's also 35, 40 there.
Right. So that would be the first thing. And that's true for social studies, that's just the fifth grade for an elementary school. That's true for writing, that's just the fifth grade for writing. So I think that's part of the conversation. But I would also say to your point, that we value the ACT, yes, I think we do value the ACT. But I think you're starting to see Western Kentucky University is a good example. Western Kentucky University just removed the ACT from every scholarship application that they do. So I think it's a conversation of, is it important? Absolutely it is. But once again, for us to go on, we could get ACT scores up pretty quickly. We could take our high school students and instead of putting them, so taking our juniors and seniors, instead of exposing them to workforce opportunities, we could put them in an hour or 2 hours every day for ACT preparation. Because as a former high school principal, I'll tell you that test is more about test strategy and large things than it really is about content knowledge. So we could do that. But I think what we've said as a district is that the opportunity that a kid has at Orbis, or the opportunity a kid has at NPR to learn about an industry, to have a community partner that deeply invests in that kid, that pays that kid, that grows that kid, that 2 hours a day is better spent with that person than what it would be in a test prep conversation. Now,
That's not what I mean.
right, I
What
get
you're
that.
saying is the opposite. I'm saying that both have to work side by side.
Absolutely, and I would say that.
You can't do one without the other.
But I would say though that I think our conversation is if we do these things, the level of investment in an ACT is going to go up because you're going to have not just an educator that stands in front of a kid and says, hey Diane, well, you really need to do well in this ACT. But you got a community member that kid's working for, that kid that's invested in that kid's life saying, well, you got the ACT coming up next Tuesday. What's some things that you're thinking about that? That conversation becomes powerful. You have a Parent Connect leader that spent 3 years with that kid that's able to have a conversation with that kid about what it means to, what that test means, what it means for their future. There's power in those conversations. And so,
And remember last year when I said you get a year or two to create? You remember I said it. If you put all this, if you combine all these aspects together, those students would care more about what they're doing, would care more about their tests, would care, or will care more about it.
and I think
And that's what I'm saying. You've got a leeway here.
And I think that's the power of the experiences. That's what we're saying. That a kid, if care is the right word, a kid's gonna put forth greater effort on anything in school because it's not just about the teacher in front of the classroom trying to get that kid. That there's Parent Connect leaders and community leaders and families and engagement that happens with that that's gonna create that opportunity.
But I sure didn't think it was, I'm just disappointed with it that way.
I just want to make
can't do
sure,
it.
yeah, I just want to make sure and that when the kids graduate high school and the ones who do, decide to go on to college,
Yes.
that when they do get into college, they're not going to struggle in some of these basic classes like the math. And because it does get, tremendously more difficult and just to make sure that they've got, that they're ready for it.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to say. You've got to make it all work. If we make it all, I don't mind a student working somewhere and going out for 2 hours or whatever, that's great. I applaud that. It's this I'm concerned about, is kids that want to go to take this ACT and make an excellent.
I think these are good.
I do.
I think too, to your point, like that transition readiness number,
Yeah.
the reason that I would, so if there was any number on that page that I would place tremendous value on, it's gonna be that number. One, because it's not a single test, right? It's not descriptive of the test day, that it's a much larger conversation. Two, to the state's credit, oh, sorry, I've got this new Apple Watch, right? The alarm's going off. Two, to the credit of the state, that it is encompassing of a student can earn transition readiness through work-based opportunities, through dual credit opportunities, through the ACT, through apprenticeship. There's lots of different ways to do it. So I think that number you're going to see go up because what that number is reflecting are these conversations. And then what that's going to say is if a kid is transition ready, based on what the state of Kentucky said, and kind of what we would say too, when they go to college, they're gonna be ready. Or when they leave high school, whatever that path route forward is, they're gonna be ready for that.
But I want them ACT ready too.
They can choose that. That is an option.
That's what I'm
These
saying. I
kids
want
can
them
choose that.
I want them ACT, if my son was gonna be a doctor, I want them ACT ready.
And then
Your
your son
daughter
would go,
wants to be an engineer.
then she'll go to ACT prep, and that'll be what her pathway that she chooses.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not gonna make my welder, if my daughter wants to be a welder, I'm not gonna make her go to ACT prep. Why would
But
I?
they have to take the ACT.
Right, they do have to take the ACT,
Yes.
By law.
By law, you have to
Right.
take the ACT.
but they don't have to get a minimum score, do they, by law?
No.
No,
So
they can
we-
come in with a
It
nine
changed
for all
since
they
since I
care.
was in school, you know, I
Does
guess.
that mean they just sit there and fill out the ACT,
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4? I know they do. But
So-
I'm trying to make a point that we have to make sure that they're all ready for anything, in college and career, if that's the
And
name
I
of it.
think
college and
ultimately
career.
that's what the goal is, and I think that's what,
Yes.
yeah, ultimately that's what the goal is.
And that's what our transition readiness numbers
Right.
are
And
really
when you see the
indicating.
scores, I think it's a little, just kind of, I think, screwy, just because they're changing, testing models and structures and things like that. And so when you look at science, you think, oh my gosh, it went from a 26.5 down to a 19.1.
It's
not the same- it's not the same scale, though.
It's not the same scale.
I know, they
It's not.
changed everything, yes.
So it's almost comparing apples to oranges, right?
But I just want to make
Is that
sure
right?
our kids
We're
are
very,
ready.
we're very fortunate. I'm just going, we're very fortunate in those county schools right now. We have a lot of powerful momentum within our schools due to the people and the leadership in those buildings. We have a lot of energy in our community, and that will continue to propel this work forward. You're not going to see, in some cases, a straight line of positive correlation to this, but you are going to see a lot of powerful things going on, and I think we can pretty clearly say that we're seeing that in our school visits. We can say that the feedback we're getting from our leadership teams is positive. And we're just scratching the surface of these experiences, because they're just happening, because they haven't changed. People are reallocating schedules, they're reallocating resources, the money has shifted, and this is some powerful stuff that's happening.
Yeah, a blip like this doesn't
I think-
concern me. You're gonna have ebbs and flows throughout life. There's no substitute, in my opinion, for a holistic approach to a kid and to have them develop into, I was fortunate to be called an industrious personality to where you can, get all of these different types of experiences, and once you reach that, we're creating a comfort zone for these kids to collaborate with each other and just feel at home, and that's going to result later on, in my opinion.
I think too that if I take my hat off, director, whatever, and put it aside and speak as a parent of 2 kids in Nelson County schools, the star rating right there for where my son goes to elementary school, if anybody asked me the experience that he has, it would be, how many stars I could give him on things that matter to me. He's excited about school, he learns in school, he's got, this caring, connect conversation, he's exposed to this, what does it mean to have a work-based class there at his elementary school that they're thinking about. Those are experiences to me that matter. As a parent, I can speak as a parent. So, Jeff gave this quote, and I think it's a great quote to transition us to the end here, because I think all of this really comes back to how are we thinking about whole system change? How are we engaging people to think about whole system change? And so the quote was, NPDL is not an implementation approach for locals or training a program or tool, but rather a facilitation of local capacity that unleashes talent, know-how, and commitment. So you guys have heard about Backpack Days. That was a commitment that was made. And so we are fortunate next Monday, the 14th, to come together at Thomas Nelson. We'll have every employee in our district together under one roof. Teachers, cafeteria leaders, transportation leaders, everyone will be together. And groups of those people are all leading different things that day. So we have transportation leaders leading some conversations. We have teachers leading conversations. We have a large number of people leading conversations. So this was something that Ms. Whitlow put together that we're really excited about. If you go, I think the link is actually ncsbackpackdays.com. So if you want to go check this out, you can see what this looks like. So we have a nutrition team of those people that are thinking about student caretaking in the cafeteria. What does that look like to care for kids in the cafeteria? This is the first session. We have all kinds of different people. We have students leading a session that day around the work-based experience that they're having. This is around personnel and how we onboard employees, what it looks like to care for them during that conversation. So we're really excited about this work. It's going to be a fun day, I think, at Thomas Nelson, and we're going to be able to see lots of really great stuff.
Yeah, so ncsbackpackdays.com. You're obviously more than welcome to attend. This is going to be, so we will be coming together around 8 o'clock that morning and have about 20 minutes or so for fellowship and connecting. And we'll be in the media center, the auditorium for probably about 20 minutes, kicking it off. And then 600 people will be spreading out across that building over approximately 70 sessions. I think the nice thing is there's no principal, there's no board central office administrator, there's no one leading these sessions but the people leading the work. So this will allow you, this will allow you to click on any picture and see what it is that they're leading, and it'll tell you, okay, so Foster Heights is doing a fantastic job right now telling their school story via social media. These are the three teachers that are leading that charge, and they're going to talk about how they're doing a shared leadership process. So you think about coherence and whole system change. This is the type of work that really Brooke and Chase and Robin and Laura and principals have committed to, and it's a powerful. You see, Dusty McCoy will be there presenting on the work going on at the airport. And again, so who can attend these sessions? Anybody that's there. So what we're going to basically, you're attending 3 sessions. You can choose the 3 sessions you attend, and you don't attend the sessions of your own school. You attend the sessions of other places. So that's essentially what it is. So ncsbackpackdays.com. I think so for us, this backpack day conversation is really modeling what we're building over time. But this is the first district-wide one. And on February 14th, Valentine's Day, I believe we're doing this same thing. But it's student gift showcase. So students will be leading sessions, presenting all across the district. Right?
We have some schools. We have some schools that, just so you guys know, we do have some schools though this go around that have students that are leading some of the conversations. So some of that's taking place this time, but the goal is in February. It's mostly student led and student opportunities. So.
Yeah, this looks just like this on your phone too. You got ncsbackpackdays.com. It looks just like this, and it's very easy to navigate. Just in case you need it. So 15 minutes, like exploring backpack days.
I think the power is every school's represented, every department's represented, and the people that are leading, and really it's aligned to the things we're trying to do as a district, but there's a lot of local autonomy and what that looks like at New Haven, Boston, and Bloomfield, and what they're trying to think about as a school.
So just to give you guys some clarity, there are 3 priorities that they play off of. All right, so we look at local collaboration priorities. The literacy, the reading and writing priority that we've established. Community-centered experiences, which is a larger umbrella for student leadership or workforce development. That's more broad, and then caretaking. So those are the 3 priorities that they latch into. Just so you know, that's how it all kind of goes.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That being said, I don't think we have any guests to have you, and the one that left, and Mr. Brooks, are you okay? Okay, I need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion.
Okay, I got a motion from Ms. Britting. Second? Thank you, Ms. Dye.
Okay,
That would be second. All in favor? Meeting adjourned.
What's
Thank
that
you.
word?
You guys.